Okay, The Moon Smells Like Gunpowder.
Yes.
Welcome to Brussels.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having
really
this wonderful
appreciate
film.
it.
Thank you.
And how I know you're involved in this, Jeff, but what's your part in the making
Oh,
film? Sorry.
part of the movie. I play as Henry, who is an intelligence agent.
Yeah.
And you follow Henry through different parts of the world, basically, and you're actually just watching him, and you hear a telephone conversation. So Henry is at the point where in his life where he is coming to a big decision, and I think that decision is going to cause repercussions.
Right.
So when he makes that decision, you find out that those repercussions are going to come after him, and they come after him in the form of somebody who has been
dispatched, if you will, by Blair, his handler. Well, Mark Solter.
Mark Solter.
Co-writer along with Jeff,
Yeah.
director, cinematographer, editor, co-editor. My wife assisted on that, and I did sound design on that as well. Really what the film is about is we were interested, Jeff and I he was coming out to America, so we were discussing kind of some ideas to put together.
Because you two knew each other already.
We did. We've known each
Yes,
other since
we met.
2013,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we had already worked on a project together down in New Zealand. So when he was coming out to America on a holiday, I decided that I was going to ruin his holiday by asking, why don't we make something for the brief period of time that you'll be here?
But you must have had an idea. I mean, you can't have just out of the blue.
Well,
Right, or did you?
Not
Surely
really. I mean, we had some, I think, things that he and I are interested in, both mutually and exclusive. But the idea was let's put something together, because he'll be here. You were going to be here for, I think, about 3 or 4 days or something, and then he was going on to New York.
Yeah.
And so, as I remember it, we talked briefly about some ideas. We started scripting independently. Jeff had written some ideas, and I had written some things, and this was over the course of a few days. And essentially, he flew, I believe, on a Thursday.
Without seeing your script.
Without
basically.
seeing anything.
I wrote a monologue.
Right.
A monologue that Henry says. So, just by what Mark had said, about the story. And so, that was really interesting when we came together, and I read the script, and I thought, oh wow, this is going to be very interesting.
Well, then we got together, and he was rewriting the script and a few things when he got here. But essentially, you flew on a Thursday, got here on a Friday. We shot Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and I think you went to New York on Monday, came back. We did another day of pickups, and we were done.
Crikey, that is fast, isn't it?
Yeah, but I did a couple of little things on my own while he was gone, and it took some time to put it all together. But essentially what it's about is exactly that. We wanted to explore the idea of this professional, if you will, that wanted to be out of a situation. In this case, he's an intelligence and surveillance specialist who doesn't want any more of it. And so, but he's been accused of sort of high crimes and misdemeanors by his handler, and so another party is dispatched to ameliorate the situation, to take care of it, if you will. The idea too was we wanted to do things kind of without the usual tropes in mind, like guns and all of that. There were limitations that we put on ourselves because it was such a short period of time that we could do this. I was also limiting myself to the equipment that I had on hand at home. I realized I had a few more lights than I thought I had, but it was essentially what was in a closet: some tungsten sources, some fluoro sources.
I'd love to have that in my closet.
Yeah. Well, they were very small and old little systems, but and camera was, I considered shooting it in 16 millimeter, but it was an access of time to get stock out of LA to do that, and that was going to be a little bit of a problem, so we ended up just shooting it on a little Panasonic GH2. This little still camera with some Russian Lomo lenses. I've got a Lomo set of prime lenses, and that was that.
And again, it sort of fits neatly into what I was asking in the last film, and I'm always interested in how you give a filmic look, and they had to do theirs in post. But I think the ability now is with certain cameras, you can make it filmic out of the box. I don't know how you got the look on your one. Was it an out of the box solution, as in you're shooting it gives you that look? Is it yours is post, I guess, is it?
Well, it's a combination of things. It was shot Rec 709, which it's not. There were no LUTs added. It's not a raw platform at all. It was a 1080 origination. It wasn't in 2 or beyond or anything like that. To the credit of that sensor, because it's a micro Four Thirds sensor, and Panasonic, all sensors to me are a bit like film stocks. Red.
Is that how they judge it? That's interesting.
Well, I do now. It's because the Alexa platform, the Airy platforms, Panavision systems, Red systems, and all of that. The quality of those sensors, Blackmagic for that matter, they're all just slightly different from each other, and you can kind of relate them to Agfa stocks, Fuji stock, which those are all gone now. Kodak's the only manufacturer now. But straight from the camera itself was the look. I would say came from mixing and applying certain color temps in lighting. I would say that the Lomo lenses had a lot to do with that. There's sort of a knockoff of a Zeiss 2.1 Super Speed. They're a low contrast lens, so when you kind of hard contrast the light a little bit against the quality of that glass, it tends to perform that way.
And this lens is what you're saying. Lens itself is saying. I said to you off camera. It's normally IMDb people. Obviously, you want a little bit of background. I didn't. But I knew from us talking yesterday that you really knew your stuff. And what's ever so interesting about the look of your film is whenever I talk to filmmakers that are editors, producers, writers, directors, sound designers, everything to the film, often. This is them telling you, this is not me, but they will say, oh, actually, that was a little bit too much and I wished I'd knocked something back because it kind of affects film. But I'm not just saying this because you're here, but with you, it's clear that you're sort of a master of all these things because to do the sound, I mean,
I wouldn't say that.
But but I'm saying that film has a really professional look. So,
Thank you.
And it would, so the question I'm getting to is, can you tell us something of your background? Because you've obviously been in in the industry for a while.
Well, if I may preempt that a little bit with the look of the project itself was when it went into, I had done the grade up at Sugar Studios LA. Everything was done at home essentially, with the exception of the mix and the grade. I thought I'm going to take that outside to do that. And we were fortunate enough to work with Bruce Bolden as our colorist, who's worked with Gus Van Sant. He worked on Elephant and those kind of, he's worked with Harris Savitas over the years and all of that. And Bruce had kind of pushed that third channel up in resolve on it and gotten it to a place of kind of hypersaturation. Then I could take it back on my own system at home and then desaturate it.
Oh, right, so he gave it a look that you knew would be...
He built up what had already been there a little bit, because it's a 420 system. He built that up just a little bit more, and then so I could take it and then desaturate it back to a place where I wanted it to live in that. So I'm not sure that explains how it was at, but
well, all it tells me as a kind of layman is you can see and hear the quality on the film. I mean, the film's a really great. It's a bloody great film anyway, but it has an edge. Without denigrating any film here, because a lot of films are brilliantly made, but I know, having spoken to lots of filmmakers and seen the work that's come through, you kind of know when you're looking at someone that really had a career where they really know what they're doing. And that's not to say a lot of filmmakers here don't, because they obviously do. But the fact that you shot this in 3 or 4 days, I know post you obviously had a lot of time to do that. I know in post and pre, you obviously still lots of time. But even so, to get that in the can and the film out is not something. It's going to be devilishly difficult for anyone, But it sounds to me as though really know your stuff, and that's apparent from conversations that we've had. But anyway, So
I've worked as a cinematographer since professionally since about 2003.
Right.
Yeah. So but I was I write as well, and I had an agent for a while as a writer. And like most people who kind of lament the idea that things that they're writing or working on never seem to get made or anything like that, I just started shooting on my own and just went out and bought a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of wine and a couple of lights and sat in an apartment for 6 months and just
a red or something,
and just started lighting things and started playing around with that, because I was always intrigued with, I think, the cinematographic aspect of filmmaking. Of course, I think it's all related to every design aspect that's in it. I mean, you start building in great costuming and great locations and all of that. I mean, this all just kind of really helps to build any work that I do. But anyway, back to the
No, it's a really interesting point. I mean, we use Ridley Scott for me, is like a great example of that. You can say what you like about Alien Covenant and Prometheus, which I don't think they kind of taken away from the Alien franchise for me, because I don't think should have made them. But you can't deny the look of both films because they are typically stunning looking on these.
Sure.
And whenever you look at anything on Prometheus or Alien Covenant or any of his work, to me, you're looking at something. Every frame could almost be a painting, you know, because he shoots it so well, doesn't he? Right, you know.
Sure.
So though the film might not be great, which I don't think those two are, even though I own them. Taking aside from that, I like. He's a luscious filmmaker. Is what so my eyes drawn to how film looks immediately, and I know it's all about the story, which sort of neatly brings you. So when you're collaborating, I mean, how does this sort of kind of happen?
Well, I mean that idea of the look and the way something is shot, and that was what I sort of fell in love with when Mark came down to shoot a small little thing we did called 45 RPM, which I'd sort of written on, and it was supposed to be just a small little thing, and Mark was down there doing some work, but he had some time after to do 3 or 4 days of doing some shooting, and so we met then, and it was seeing that film was sort of like, wow, that's extraordinary, and so we sort of kept up. That was in 2013. And I came back on 2014 and said, you know, I'm coming over, you know, let's meet up. And the idea was born to do something. So it's been sort of a great time for me, because I sort of haven't been in film very much at all. I've sort of done theatre stuff, and that's sort of been way sort of on the outskirts of theatre, kind of like small independent stuff. But meeting Mark and doing some writing, and I sort of do some music as well. So there was all these things that sort of I was able to explore for myself and have that sort of collaboration with Mark, who sort of instilled something that said, yeah, let's do something. So that was really interesting for me.
And I suppose, the nice thing is you kind of know, in a really positive way, the trust is there already because you know he's going to produce something great.
Which
takes a lot of risk out of it.
And the whole sound design that Mark did, you know, which took over
it took
a year and a half. Yeah, I mean, I know we won't get, but I'd love to know, because that so really interests me how people do the sound.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, Norm Skip, who's become a friend of Mark, which we're going to go and see in Manchester. He did the music for did a musical score, and roped in some friends of his from the orchestra and stuff like that. So it was an electronic plus live sort of acoustic instruments. And yeah, that was fantastic as well. And I had just started playing music again, and some music that I'd done with a friend of mine, Mike. We have a little band called Fear Up Harsh, and so some of that music that Mark was in, he came around one Sunday and we played, and that was, I'd sort of thought, that would be really interesting. There was a little piece there that would be really interesting to be in there. So all these things sort of
came together.
Yeah, came together, which was fantastic.
Well, that was kind of the idea of the whole project. Really, was we're just going to let every department kind of evolve on its own. Yeah. In working with Norm and the score and all of that, it wasn't, you know, I like these kinds of musics, let's make it sound like this. It was just really listen to what you're hearing here as you watch this project, and go there. You know, I mean, I can tell you that I like, you know, Bernard Herrmann or Brian Eno, and I do.
Yeah, a couple of great names I do, yeah.
But I'm not asking you to be that, because that may not work. And it took them, I think they worked on that score for about 1.5 years off and on, because they would get together and record things, and ended up bringing in, gosh, almost 1.5 hours worth of music, I believe, that I had to cut down into 28 minutes. And at that, I think I stripped out probably 60% of what they wrote just to be able to do that.
But it must be lovely to them go massive, because I know you're not asking them to do a score for Taxi Driver, but even so, for them to come in, because that's almost enough to fill a feature, isn't it?
Sure.
So it must be quite a luxurious position to be able to strip down, or maybe it's a tough decision
it's
because
tough.
It's also good.
Well, because I'm not a sound editor, and
Right.
I'd never done that, and I'd never done sound effects or anything like that. I'd spoken to a couple of people about it, but they didn't seem to kind of understand where I thought this ought to go. And I have a twin brother who's produces and engineers in music, and owns a studio out in North Carolina, works out of New York and LA, San Francisco quite a bit. And we've always been into kind of sound and music and that sort of thing. And so allowing Norm, giving these guys the opportunity to just create what they saw fit, but then taking that and trying to turn it into, because I guess you can kind of score for theme, you can score for character, or you can just create a bunch of music and try to cut it, but without what false starts and false endings, I think is what they call it, where they kind of create endings where you can fit things in so it works.
Oh, I see.
Instead of just fading them out,
okay.
is really difficult. But then the same thing was then the score, I think, where we all kind of agreed on Norm's approach was it in and of itself was kind of a sound effect at times. And so, but then it was an idea of how to build a world of atmospheres, because of what you see in this film, from trains to churches to streets and people and all of that. And it was hard. It's just.
And who came up with the title?
I did.
Was that straight out of the box?
Yeah, it was. It's. I can't remember exactly where it came from, other than it's based on the idea that I want to say that I'd seen a documentary piece where astronauts had been asked, what do you all agree upon one thing about your travels to the moon? And they all said, it smells like spent gunpowder.
How bizarre.
They all agreed on that one.
So even through the circular or the respiratory system, they got a sense of the smell?
Yeah, well, it's, I guess, what they get on their clothes when they would
yeah.
bring it back in, and they would get into some lock system or whatever, how they do their thing, and you can smell it.
Oh.
And they said, yeah, it all smells like, and the phrase was, it smells like spent gunpowder. When I heard that, it rang like a great little metaphor for me, was the moon. Again, the moon is the lunar, the lunatic, or the ambitions, the love. It all has these sort of like connections, if you will, into wonderful things. Or prospects or possibility, but if it smells like gunpowder, then something might be wrong. So I guess that's that was, and I thought it tracked well. It just it's something you'll remember.
Yeah, what it is. I was like, what the hell? Because sort of think there's no relation, but now I see, like you say, it's a metaphor for something else.
Yeah, well, it was to act in that. It was to function in that world, and exploring then the idea of the film itself is the idea of a chapel perilous. I won't go into defining that as to what that means. You can look that up. But the idea of a chapel perilous and the journey of the individual, you have choices as to whether you're going to proceed through or you're going to retreat in abject horror and say, I'll never do that again, or when you're in the perilous itself, as you never know when it's going to end. Hence some of the visual exploration in the film, why things kind of move the way that they do, and particularly with the ending, I'll say.
It reminded me a little bit of The Conversation.
Oh wow, yeah, the Coppola film, great film.
Yeah, it is great. It's probably my favourite film.
Yeah.
Because of almost like a bit of paranoia in there, and
sure.
What's this guy? What's it all about? What's he done? Who are these other people that And it just gave me a little bit of that feeling about the film.
Right. Nice.
But I really loved it. And are you collaborating on something at the moment? After this, I should say.
We are, yes. Yeah, there's a couple of things. We're
rom-com or something.
well,
no, maybe no.
Probably should,
Why not?
We're actually making something here right now in the hotel.
No way.
We are, yeah. The last couple of nights we've been exploring and all of that. I'll put some images up from it and tag you guys on it. So
please do, yeah. No, please do. That'd be fantastic.
Because our jet lag is so effed up, if you will. Excuse my language.
No.
I mean, it's like the late afternoon gets a little squirrely, but then 10 o'clock at night hits and everybody's just wide awake. So when it's quiet, we've been exploring that.
We don't really get a chance to sort of see each other,
right?
At all, really, only through Skype kind of thing. So
which is never quite the same.
Yeah,
I know it's bloody incredible that you can do this.
Yeah.
Like my sister in Australia, she Skype, WhatsApp call me the same thing. I know.
Right.
And then you only think, it's amazing, but it's not. To see them in 3D, it's never quite. I mean, it's very useful, incredibly useful, and it's free, of course. But it's never quite the same, is it?
Yeah. So getting together, it's sort of like a great opportunity to do something.
Yeah. I was just there before we came here. I was doing a film down in New Zealand, a small project with a mutual friend director, and so we had an opportunity to explore some of the things that we're doing.
Brilliant.
So we're doing another small one after this one. We're working on a thing called A Pen for the Blind in the Knife Drawer. And then we're doing Or Current Resident as a feature length that we're working on writing. Yeah.
And again, there's another quirky title.
Sure.
I won't ask you because you won't probably want to tell me, but once it's finished, I'll be intrigued to know what this is all about.
I would love to share it with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was amazing.
Oh,
You bet.
Thank you so much.
No, thanks.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh,
Really
no.
appreciate the opportunities.
You're more than welcome. That's
Yeah,
great
man.
fun. Thank you.